twisted new season of The Traitors is finally here.
What did I get myself into?
The prize, $250,000.
I'm gonna lie and cheat and do whatever I have to do to win.
If you're gonna come for me, I'll finish you.
Shame on you!
I'm out for blood.
It is like a firing squad. Boom, 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 boom.
Let the games begin. Emmy Award winner The Traitors. New episodes streaming Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, only on Peacock.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, a politics podcast that's less sphere-influencing and more globe-trotting. I'm Alex Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith. Twice a week we sift through the noise to clear up the signal and give you homework to do.
Because politics should be something we do together, not something done to us.
So stop the rage scrolling, close the browser tabs, take a deep breath and get ready for another Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Naomi, the only politics obsessive who has properly left X.
And I'm Alex, the only politics obsessive that Grok refused to undress.
And I'm Kenny, the only politics obsessive with his own OnlyFans account. And on that note...
Link in the show notes.
Grok doesn't have to undress me. £2.50 will do it very nicely, thank you.
And if you pay a bit more, he won't send any nudes.
Listeners, those of you who are still with us after that, thank you to the many of you who have joined us in the new year. And a special thanks to those who help us pay the bills on our little show. If you want to help keep us free for everyone, please head over to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod and you can support us for the price of a supermarket meal deal.
Now, this week is all about taking sides. So, first up, we don our political biohazard gear, wade into the ever-deepening pool of Tory defectors to reform, and ask whether Farage is wise to be turning his party into a museum of Tory rejects.
And in a world dominated by headlines about Trump, we turn our gaze to the East for a long overdue focus on China, its view of the world, and of course, its little local difficulty over an embassy building in London.
To do that, we have the perfect guest, a Times columnist and former host of the influential Chinese Whispers podcast. Welcome to your Quiet Riot debut, Cindy Yu.
Hello, thanks for having me.
And talking of whispers, I hear you just got engaged, Cindy.
I did just get engaged. And I'm flashing the ring right now.
Oh, very good. It's a very good rock.
It's a good rock. It's a good rock. We got engaged on Christmas morning.
Oh, how
so that was
lovely.
a very nice present. He actually forgot other presents, so that will do.
Was it planned? Was it expected? Or was
I was totally surprised.
Oh, right.
Surprised.
So it is possible that he did actually forget the presents and then
Last minute bought some
shit,
presents.
I've got to do something big now.
That's a tip for male listeners out there. If you forget your Christmas presents for your girlfriend, just propose to her instead.
Oh, that's wonderful news.
Thank you.
And are you sort of planning a long engagement? Are you already into wedding planning?
December's quite an awkward time to get engaged because you kind of miss the train of this summer.
Right.
And we either would have a winter wedding this year or you go for the summer after, which would be a year and a half away.
But why? Because venues are all booked up and
Venues
stuff.
are booked up, yeah. They say, I mean, we've obviously been looking at articles about how to plan a wedding. The average British wedding takes 12 months to plan, apparently.
I eloped.
Oh, very good.
It cost almost nothing.
Yeah.
And was very, very quick. Can't recommend it enough. We got to pick any day of the week we wanted. Very worthwhile, but no. So if you want a lovely
Your
big wedding,
family would kill you.
Exactly.
My grandma would kill me.
Totally.
Turns out that the Tories can defy the polls and win the next general election. All they need to do is break away and reform as re-Tories. Rebrand as new and improved Tories, low-fat, no calories, more filling Tories, Tories zero, clean, persistent stains even at low temperatures, non-bio Tories, the Tories who always knew what needed to be done but were not allowed to do it by other Tories who will soon join them, similarly reformed. Nigel Farage left the Conservative Party in 1992. Richard Tice was a member and donor as recently as 2018. But now no fewer than 8 former government ministers, including Nadine Dorries, Jake Berry, Maria Caulfield, and most recently, Nadhim Zahawi, have joined Reform UK alongside 65 former Tory councillors.
She said a moment ago, I'm all right. She clearly didn't listen to the advice of Nadhim Zahawi, because what he told her, he's now made fun of it. He told her that they failed on mass migration, they failed on our armed forces, and he told her that she's leading, his words, a defunct brand the nation can no longer trust. No wonder he's joined the Tory migration to reform. Mr. Speaker, it's the second Boris wave. We stand here with a majority Labour government. She sits there with her party that lost 2/3 of their MPs at the last election, and she's losing more every week. They're queuing up to join the member of Clacton's laundry service for disgraced Tory politicians.
But is it boosting Reform's chances of winning the next election, or will the Conservative brand toxicity follow them into their new party? The polls are currently edging down in the wrong direction for Farage, and accusations abound that he's simply recreating the party that was given the boot by the great British public not 18 months ago. The right of British politics, meanwhile, is fracturing. Both Advance UK and Stephen Yaxley Lennon's lot are all gearing up to peel support away from Farage. Even UKIP is rebranding. When disgraced ministers and rejected councillors all rush to the same lifeboat, is it a life-preserving device, or does it sink? Naomi, Best for Britain has today launched a very handy defection tracker, so we can all keep tabs on just how many former Conservatives have jumped ship. We'll stick a link in the show notes. Nadhim Zahawi's tweets that have surfaced since his defection are genuinely a goldmine.
And like Reform are quite good at comms, right? They're quite good at comms.
Yeah.
So I would have thought they might have just said, look, let's just quickly go back through the old tweets and delete any before we go live with this. Or maybe they thought, look, even the guy that really, really hated us is happy to join us. I don't know whether there's a calculation there, cock up or conspiracy, I don't know. But basically for years, Zahawi sort of publicly warned us all that Farage's vision was racist, frightening, and he repeatedly said he would never abandon the Tories and even dismiss Farage as establishment. And now he's marched straight into Farage's camp. So it's kind of like the political plot twist, because it defies the story arc that Zahawi himself helped write. One of his tweets actually said, I'm not British born, but I am as British as you are. Your comments are offensive and racist. I would be frightened to live in a country run by you. I mean, that's packing a punch in terms of what he said not a few years ago about Farage.
Maybe he's still scared and thinks being in the cabinet
it might give him a shield. But it all kind of started to make sense later on in the day when it was revealed that he had just been turned down by Kemi Badenoch for a Conservative Party period. Allegedly. That's been well reported. Yeah. So that's quite interesting. More frightened of not getting a peerage in the Tory party than being frightened of aiding and abetting what he himself called a racist.
Yeah, I'm afraid that Layla has had to endure quite a high degree of really quite unpleasant racist abuse. It's horrible, it's nasty. I have spoken to her about it and said, look, just ignore it, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. I'm afraid X is a free speech platform. There are many things that are said on it that are deeply offensive, but that doesn't mean it should be banned.
Cindy, Reform now has a number of high-profile ethnic minority people involved at the highest level, from chairman and donor Zia Youssef to their London mayoral candidate, Layla Cunningham, and now Nadhim Zahawi is in the fold. But it also has MPs like Sarah Pochin, who said it drives her crazy to see Black and Asian actors in TV adverts, and a membership base that's quite willing to make Islamophobic posts on social media and things like that. So are these high-profile defections Nigel Farage's way of signalling that they're going mainstream? Or are they just window dressing?
What a good question. I think for Farage, he is just not on the same level as some of the people who support him, if social media is anything to go by. And so there are Reform voters who clearly think that to be white is a necessary part of being British. I don't think Farage actually does think that. And so for him, there is no conflict to have people like Zia Youssef and Layla Cunningham and Nadhim Zahawi in the party. But actually, the problem he has is that he's built this party and arguably the movement since UKIP, where people don't actually think that on the fringes. And the dog whistling is to encourage that kind of ethnocentric view of Britishness. And I think for these non-white members of Reform, It will be quite difficult because, of course, you can agree with the political cause of reform being anti-immigration or whatever it is without feeling like you're lesser just because you're not white, but they are recipients of such horrible abuse on both X and I think...
From like their own supporters.
From people who supposedly are supporting them.
And who defend the comments that it's been widely reported Nigel Farage made at school. You know, and these are people that have come out to bat for him quite strongly in the last few months.
Although, of course, Farage's take on that is, I never did this at all.
Sure.
So he
well, I mean, he's gone through phases
of it. Yeah.
His first phase was, I never did this.
Yeah.
His second phase was, it was just banter. I didn't mean anything by it.
Yeah, I think he's now since gone back to the first phase.
Well, he's now gone to a third phase that, as I understand it, is these people are making these stories up because they're politically motivated.
Yeah. But I think the tricky thing for reform is like, how much do you keep your sense of being a party that gets the kind of ethnic tensions and worries of people in this country whilst introducing so many people who are children of immigrants or immigrants themselves? You know, I think on social media, we've already seen some peeling away, people on the extreme right who say, this is not the party I wanted, you know, the kind of Tommy Robinsons. So I think it's an interesting one for them to do, to become more mainstream, that they maybe have to lose some of that more extreme edge of things. But then who are they without that? Are they just the Tories again?
The trade-off is it a bigger risk for them to be seen as not mainstream and extreme in some way? Or is it a bigger risk for them to be seen as establishment, to be seen as simply a rehashing of the Tory party?
A laundry service for disgraced
Which do you think it is?
So I talked about this on the show before. I think there is an allergy amongst Farage and some of his, what I would describe as kind of golf club bore types, to Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson type thugs. They don't want them in their club. They might actually agree with them on, you know, Islamophobia, on Trump's view of London being subject to Sharia law or whatever nonsense has come out of their mouths in recent weeks, but they don't really want to be associated with each other. And that's a class thing. And of course, you've got a figure like Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, as we should call him, who wants to be famous in his own right and will therefore challenge and call out Farage anytime he thinks he's done something wrong, most recently putting a Muslim candidate to be London mayor. So I think the whole thing is interwoven with racial identity, views on immigration, views on minority rights, and the class system in the UK.
You get the situation where on the Labour side, you have Shabana Mahmood at the moment put in the position where she's likely to have to say quite a lot of anti-immigrant stuff. And we also saw a similar sort of phenomenon with
Suella Braverman,
Priti Patel. And so is there something to that?
I think basically it's possible to be anti-immigrant but not racist. But the line is quite fine. And so when a white politician does the anti-immigrant thing, he's very, or they or she are very easily accused of being racist as well. But if you're of colour, then, you know, nobody will say that Shabana Mahmood is anti-Islam, really.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, she can then just talk about the political cause of being anti-mass immigration. So it feels safer in some ways. But I honestly think, like, for people like that, it is a really tricky line to cross because some of the people who agree with her on being anti-mass immigration are going to be racist. And she's going to be a victim of that. So it's a really tricky Venn diagram, really.
Not all anti-immigration advocates are racist, but all racists are anti-immigration.
Right, exactly.
That's true, yeah. It is also entirely possible to be from a minority and anti-immigration and xenophobic.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
of course.
You know,
Yeah.
And it's something that I think we see with second-generation immigrants quite a lot, that they do have a pull-up-the-ladder tendency. And I'm not sure that's talked about enough, actually.
No, it's not.
But I hear it so much as an immigrant myself, this notion that my parents were different because they came here and worked hard or whatever.
Yeah.
Everyone's parents were different.
Yeah.
Whatever point they came to whatever country and for whatever reason, their parents were different.
And it can happen within groups. I know people of second, third, even I think just about fourth generation Polish in the UK who don't like the new wave Poles coming over in the mid-noughties. because they're
I find that quite hilarious.
Within, greater ethnic groups, for example, in the Chinese community, there's a lot of Hong Kongers who were here, in the last century, who look down on the mainlanders who come later.
Totally.
And the mainlanders are now looking down on the Hong Kongers who came in 2020.
Incredible.
But I think that's what the white majority often kind of misses out, is the tensions between different ethnic groups. That's why we don't really like the term BAME at all.
And within them.
Because I just think we're not all the same. And actually, often groups hate each other as much as they hate the majority ethnicity.
Yeah. I had an Asian boyfriend once. He was a Hindu, and he said to me, the worst thing I could do than bring you home as a white girl to my parents would be to bring home a Jamaican girl.
Right. Jamaican?
Yeah.
Interesting.
His parents were very much, I think, our children will marry other Hindus from the same caste as us. But if they're not going to, then there comes the ranking,
hierarchy of harm.
Yeah.
It's always been the case that unconscious bias has come to play in this sector massively, though. It's
not that fucking unconscious, kid. To be entirely honest.
But it's the idea of going, we've got all these people from different parts of the world, different generations who come in, and we're going to put them all in one big happy box because they're immigrants. Here are the attributes that we're going to dump on them, basically, ignoring the fact that what you're dealing with is humans of different backgrounds and with different biases and different hatreds and loves and things that they laugh at. I mean, it would be more surprising if this sort of reaction from immigrant communities everywhere didn't happen in so many ways.
Yeah, I find it fascinating because it's also so completely random. I am currently scripting an episode of Podyssey that's all about the myth of Europa, who is an actual Asian princess abducted by Zeus as a bull and brought to Europe. So our origin story is a story of grabbing someone from over there.
Yeah.
And through doing this episode, both me and the experts that I have involved have become completely baffled at the randomness of the continent, at how random that line is behind which you say are brown people, and this side.
I mean, you are borderline.
You say border. No, but I listen. Greece has been
in and out,
either side of that line.
Cyprus even more so.
The myth of Europa was very much appropriated by Catholics, very specifically to say only we are true Europeans. At that point, Greece was part of the Ottoman Empire because it was under occupation, so it wasn't part of Europe. And then a big reason for the Philhellenism of the Romantic period, Byron and all that, and the British helping with the Greek Revolution, was the idea that they were recapturing a part of what should be white European back into the white European fold. And so it genuinely is, the more you look at it, the more bizarre this completely arbitrary line. And it's not for nothing that because that line crosses Russia and Turkey and the Middle East to a large extent, that is where you have conflict year after year, decade after decade, century after century.
Bloodiest continent in the world, the most murderous continent in the world.
And always along the lines of the people who are saying, we want to be European, and the people who are saying, you're not allowed to be European.
Yeah.
Quiet, Riot. You didn't start a business just to keep the lights on. You're here to sell more today than yesterday. You're here to win. Lucky for you, Shopify built the best converting checkout on the planet. Like the just one tapping, ridiculously fast acting, sky-high sales stacking, champion of checkouts. That's the good stuff right there. So if your business is in it to win it, win with Shopify. Start your free trial today at shopify.com/win. Quiet, Riot.
Naomi, you've been looking at the polling.
Yeah.
I've been saying this for a while, that it seemed to me like reform hit a ceiling. For about 4 or 5 months now, they really haven't been moving up or down from that 30-ish%. But they're now actively going backwards.
They are. I'm going to come on to the national.
Okay.
But I want to start with the Welsh, because we are in a big election year. And we've been talking about, is this going to be reform breaking through in Wales? Can they supersede Plaid Cymru? They haven't even said who their first minister will be, yet several polls had them.
We're not even talking about Labour, which
exactly,
is weird
right?
in itself.
Totally weird. And yesterday, we're recording this on Wednesday, so Tuesday, YouGov for ITV poll for Wales came out with Plaid on 37 and Reform fallen right back to 23. Not as wow as Labour being on 10 behind Greens and Reform and Plaid. But in terms of seat distribution, that then looks like a Plaid Green coalition government in the Senate.
Because
so that's quite interesting. They're moving to a
proportional
proportionate voting. That's right. Yeah,
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So there's some directly elected and some from a list.
That's correct. And we will do some specials with our Welsh correspondent, Will Hayward, in the run-up to and immediately after those big elections in May. I just think that is worth pointing out because there is an actual election that's happening. We talk about all of these midterm polls, how much can you ever really read into them? All that ever matters is an actual poll. Well, we've got one happening in May, which is a really big test of whether Reform can break through. All eyes, as you mentioned on the PR front, on what the seat distribution would have been if it had been run under first past the post. That's going to be really interesting to unpick and look at. But then nationally, you're right, Alex, Reform have hit their lowest poll rating since April last year. So again, another YouGov poll this time for Sky and The Times puts Nigel Farage on 24%, his party on 24%. So that's down to on the previous week and is their weakest showing for many months. It's coming with a mild recovery for the Tories and a slight uptick for Labour. So Tories gone up 1 point to 20 and Labour kind of gained 2 to 19 in that poll. Lib Dems and Greens either sort of staying where they were or falling back ever so slightly. And, when you're thinking about, well, why could this be? Is that Kemi Bade not doing a bit better? She is, but that probably doesn't account for it. There have been quite a lot of stories about Reform breaking election pledges. So remember, they're running quite a few councils now. They stood on tickets to cut council tax. The reality is struck. They've got in, realised how little bloody money there is. And they're now obviously signalling that they're going to be raising council tax in lots of places. Kent County Council, we talked about before, a really flagship authority for them and a key shop window for how a Reform-led area goes. And they claim that they're going to have to do a near 4% council tax increase there, which has annoyed people. So I think there's that happening. I think there is a fragmentation happening on the right of British politics. We talked about Advance. We've talked about Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib and Yaxi Lennon.
And what isn't talked about enough is that there's also a mini spate of defections from Reform to Advance.
Yes, indeed. And I just think it's really interesting that Brexit isn't that big unifying rallying cry.
Your movement gets bigger, then someone like Rupert Lowe gets a bit too uppity for himself, rubs up against Nigel Farage in the wrong way, of course you're going to splinter. This kind of thing happens in big parties all the time. Or you suck it up and you learn that you're what they call a broad church, right?
Yeah.
But Farage is only now really having to deal with that problem.
I think that Farage and Reform have got three big problems coming into the May elections, actually, never mind looking ahead to the next general election. The first one is, you mentioned it, Naomi, the fact that they're getting found out. As they get a little bit of power, they're no different to anyone else, and that's hugely problematic for them.
I would argue they are quite a bit worse, but I understand the thrust of your argument.
The second problem they have is, and this is what we've been discussing with the defections of the Tories, is a big part of their sell in the last few years.
We are anti-establishment. We are different.
We're not them. And then the third one is the classic, and this is really what you were talking about, Cindy, is the idea that they're inevitably going to be victims of their own success. If you are an anti-establishment political party and you are dominating the media headlines all the time, you're starting to get success politically, you all of a sudden are part of that establishment, no matter what you say. And those people, particularly in places like Scotland that I know, who are just wanting to vote for a party that brings a change to the table, whatever that change looks like, they just want something different. All of a sudden, Reform doesn't look different. And I don't think they take it seriously enough, the fact that they damage their prospects when we're looking to that key group of voters who just want to sweep the whole damn lot away.
I want to ask you about Scotland in a bit more detail then, because we know that people tend to vote differently in local elections to general elections. You might vote for your Lib Dem council and then your Labour MP. In England, in Holyrood elections, we know that people historically have been, OK, I'll split my ticket, I'll go for the SNP to run Edinburgh, but I'm going to go for Labour to run Westminster and other permeations of that. Do you think that this establishmentism that seems to now be gripping Reform in a way it hadn't previously will change in voter behaviour in that split ticket? Like, would you maybe have gone, all right, I'm going to give Reform a go at running Holyrood and I'll go for the Tories, or some other, whether the split ticket will be negatively impacted for Reform by this?
I think a lot of that depends on what issues surface like boils as the Holyrood elections come near. As things stand at the moment, where the Scottish electorate is still, relatively calm in terms of what it believes are the big ticket items. Immigration is more important than it was 10 years ago in Scotland, definitely. But independence remains up there, cost of living remains up there. You've got all the basics. The thing that I'm fascinated to see is whether the transmogrification of Reform into the new old Tory party, if that makes sense, has an impact. Because within Scotland, there are people who will vote for Reform up to the point where it becomes too English a party.
Yeah.
And it ceases to become a protest vote and starts to become something that particular voters are deeply, deeply uncomfortable with.
That's really interesting.
And there's a huge unionist presence up there, and it's tied in. Those of you who know Scotland will know how it ties in across social boundaries, how it ties in across sporting and football boundaries in particular, how it ties in across geographical boundaries. And that is where I'll be watching the change of Reform. Because as Reform changes, the impact and its attractiveness to these particular sorts of voters is going to morph as well. Of course it is. And it's big numbers we're talking about. When we talk about Holyrood, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people voting. So the results themselves are going to be fascinating, but I think unpicking the reasons behind the results, that's what's really, really going to be interesting for us.
Yeah.
Quiet, Riot.
Cindy, into this whole mix, anxieties about regulating social media versus freedom of speech. Of course, Elon Musk is very much of that side of politics, tends to switch his allegiance between parties, tends to play them off against each other. And that space is also vital to this side of politics. Like, a lot of them actually make a living out of it, on a very basic level. But also, it seems to me that an upstart outfit like Advance UK would have serious difficulty if suddenly X disappeared as a platform for sharing and spreading their message.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's right. I mean, it's X for older people and TikTok for younger people, isn't it? Are the two main platforms that influence political opinion in this country. Now, to what extent, we can't really quantify that very well, but certainly of people who are interested in politics and digitally active, it's those two platforms. But Elon Musk is a funny one, isn't he? He's like influencing British politics from afar. Just before I came, Alex, I sent you that funny tweet that he sent about Keir Starmer.
They appear to have backed down in this
that's what
argument
said.
about Grok, right?
Yeah, so there's an argument about Grok, about the image altering. Starmer in PMQ's Prime Minister's Questions said that X had given reassurances that it would follow the law in the UK about deepfakes and so on. Then Elon Musk, shortly after that, tweeted, "History will not be kind to Starmer," quote tweeting Zia Yusuf. So I don't know what's going on.
Just 2 days ago, he retweeted somebody who put Starmer in a bikini.
Right.
And Elon retweets it.
He's really got a bee in his bonnet about the UK being in decline. There's this whole narrative, like Elon Musk is really pushing it. The grooming gangs thing, he really picked up on that. He loves Rupert Lowe, isn't so keen on reform in general, it seems.
Although that person you mentioned was Zia Yusuf.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe that's been a useful way for them to re-ingratiate themselves.
Yeah, and Nigel Farage, the speaker, said that he wouldn't back a X ban. But, just to a broader question about banning X, I also wouldn't back an X ban. As you know, my bread and butter is reporting on China. And I don't really think that we should be a country that is looking to ban social media platforms. But I do see that the threat of banning it this week maybe has got X to play ball a bit more. So it's always hard to know, what the right way to...
It did in Brazil.
Yeah, well, exactly. So it's a tricky one for me. I want to not even have that on the table. But then if that is how you get them to control their AI, then it is difficult.
How do you think this will play out? People showing ankle to Elon Musk. I found this statement made to the Commons by Shadow Technology Secretary Julia Lopez the other day. Actually, let's have a little listen.
The government has never before proposed to wholesale block TikTok, Google or Facebook for the frequent and often flagrant misuse of their sites. It is an extraordinarily serious move against a platform that can be used for good and allowing day-to-day the free exchange of ideas, including ideas we don't like. It is that very power for good that sees Iran's mullahs reach to block the internet in the face of courageous protesters. The uncomfortable truth for all of us is that some of this imagery sits in a legal grey area. What Grok produced at scale in 2026 is a modern-day iteration of an old problem, from crude drawings to Photoshop. Further, if we wish to mitigate the risk to children, one simple intervention may help stop from sharing their own image too freely. That's raising the digital age of consent for social media to 16. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State knows that there are geopolitical consequences to her rhetoric. Figures close to President Trump have already threatened sanctions. Has the Secretary of State engaged with the US government? Has she been advised on the nature of any retaliation were the UK government to block X? The Tech Secretary has said, this government is as determined to ensure women and girls are safe online as we are to ensure they are safe in the real world. To this end, will she be ensuring the government enforces against itself for its failure to advance the rape gang inquiry, its failure to stop puberty-blocking trials, its failure to implement guidance on single-sex spaces, its inability to deport illegal migrants who have committed sex offences?
It was a full-on defense for X. And there is someone there with a lot of money that has been known to splash it on political causes in large quantities.
Yeah.
So are we going to see this right space also convulse to grab his attention? Is their audience at the moment this one man?
I think before the split with Trump, probably more so. But now that Elon is just another tech tycoon, I mean, obviously one that controls X, I think it matters less. I do want to be charitable to the Tories and say that it is a civil liberties point that they're worried about as well. This kind of idea of banning apps is not one that they want to entertain, with the exception of Kemi Badenoch's social media ban on under 16s as well.
Yeah.
But I worry about X because I think anyone who uses it has probably noticed it becoming much more encouraging of basically racist content. Yeah. The For You tab, I get all sorts of stuff from people I don't follow that is just actually atrocious. And the stuff that goes viral these days, I think, and anecdotally from a mid-ranking think tanker or journalist or whatever it is, and their posts are not getting picked up as much because it's not nearly as kind of reactive. Yeah, and that's a shame, you know. So I think, I don't know how much it's...
Have you changed how you use it? And the reason I ask is because...
Yeah, I've become racist now.
No, but I have become more aggressive on X. I mean, I've now left X.
Yeah.
And part of the reason was that I noticed that I had become more aggressive on X. I was more ready to misunderstand, to think someone was attacking me and overreact.
Do you know what?
Because it's become a really prickly space.
It's become, and people love to be passive-aggressive with each other. But I think I've been taught very early on in my career when I did used to tweet a lot of random stuff. And then one, older journalist said to me, just don't do that. Tweet your work. Don't do all those random observations on the train kind of stuff. I was like, oh, okay. So I actually don't use it to tweet personal stuff that much. Yeah. And I think that means that I don't really engage with people I know on there. I'm lurking unless I've got a big, I don't know, observation about Venezuela or about China or whatever it is. Work related. Yeah. That's how I silo it.
Fraser will be crushed, that you described him as an older journalist.
How did you know? Very good.
Okay, call to action. Don't just get off X, everybody. Go and do something old school. Go and buy a real paper. I want everyone listening to go out, whether it's weekday, weekend, and buy a physical copy of a paper. Go to a shop that still sells them. That might mean you have to go quite far. My local newsagents no longer sells any news.
Really?
They've given up stocking them. But go and do it. Part with a few quid, even if you only do it once. Let's remind ourselves of what it's like to see news laid out on a double-page spread, seeing how different stories interact with one another when you are seeing them on the same bit of A3 in a way you just don't when you're scrolling. So let's change that. So whether it's FT Weekend, Monday's Mirror, Thursday's Eye, go out and please buy.
Can I just put a call in for those few regional and local newspapers which are still doing the job properly with no money at all. So if you don't feel comfortable with the politics of national media, that's all right. There are places like Byline Times for alternative politics, but in terms of print, there's still a regional media out there struggling to keep their heads above water. So go and give your pound to them as well.
Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot.
In a world where America's intentions are difficult to glean in the face of its president's constant verbal diarrhea, China's rare and measured public statements provide an even sharper contrast than usual. But then again, one of the tropes in Western Orientalist attitudes towards China, even during the so-called golden era, has always been the assumption of a sort of deliberate inscrutability. In truth, for people who understand China's history and its internal principles of organisation and hierarchy, it is exceptionally predictable and tends to signal policy quite directly and change it very rarely. So, how do those qualities interact with a world of Trump 2.0, where everything is a constant swirl? Cindy, let's start with a narrow focus and then we can kind of zoom back out. The decision on the new Chinese embassy in London is due imminently. So, of course, opposition to it has stepped up this week. Why do you think it's become so contentious?
God, it's just so cursed, isn't it? I mean, it has been so many years in the making. I think it was 2018 when it was first sold.
Nearly a decade.
To the Chinese for £255 million. So that's part of the reason it's got so toxic now, is because it's been such a long time before it's got approval, allowing all sorts of campaigns against it to really kind of mature and come to fruition. I think initially the objections had never been about cables, sensitive cables underneath the site. It was all about local dissidents and all that sort of stuff. And then somewhere along the line, the cables became an issue. People knew about it, concerning that the government didn't know about it, if this is really a real threat. But now, we're getting to a point where the Labour government is delaying it month by month, allowing, again, much more
So it's been
opposition.
Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. It's 5 prime ministers have changed since this building was...
Yeah, although I think, listeners will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think up until 2022, the decision rested with the local council, and it's in 2022, I think Boris Johnson pulled it back into central government, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you would have thought that even at the selling process, some vetting would have been done.
Yeah.
I was talking to a government minister.
It was like, I don't know what amount of vetting was done, but the point is the Chinese bought this site specifically for their news embassy after getting clearance from the British government to do that.
And the question is, how much do they really look into that? Was it a political decision because, let's say, Theresa May wanted to please the Chinese, or was it a proper full-scale investigation? And if it was that, then how seriously should we take these threats now? And it's also murky because actually it's not the way that security services do to come out and say, we assess A, B and C is not a problem, whatever. They're not going to explain their reasoning or tell you where the cables are. So which leaves so much space for people who are critical of China to campaign on this issue. I'm not saying wrongly at all, but just in terms of kind of political strategy and communication, this has been an absolute disaster, this whole fiasco.
But the thing is, we are judging it by what is going on with this story today. But 2018, who was thinking about what cables are underneath a particular...
Well, Trump was getting pissed off with the new American embassy. He didn't like that,
but the point is, they talk about the Chinese plan as being a mega embassy. The American new embassy is almost a military compound.
Yeah, the Chinese one is the same size as the...
And across the river. And I think actually part of what's driving the Chinese to want a mega embassy is to match the...
That is one of the rumours I heard.
North of the river.
But
very vehemently rejected by a Chinese diplomat. I suggested that.
But that's just across Parliament. And we now have an American global security strategy that says they plan to interfere actively in European elections. Who is considering whether that poses any kind of security threat?
Well, obviously China and the US aren't the same.
No, obviously. But I'm saying, if you're going to worry about embassies in that way, if you're going to effectively jettison the idea that we operate in each other's countries, then the whole system of having a representative bit of your nation in other countries kind of collapses.
I think that's the problem. That's the fear here, that actually I wrote an article in defense, well, not in defense, but I wrote an article saying that the embassy should now be approved, because what happened in November is that MI5 and MI6 did actually give their green light to the embassy. They did say that the risks could be mitigated. And then in the comment section, which I do read, because I find it helpful, one of the commenters said, well, why should we give China anything? Let's have their embassy outside Hull somewhere. And I just thought, this is the very bare minimum of country to country relationship is that you give each other diplomatic representation. Now, we can dispute about the details of that, but you have to have that in your capital cities in a modern world. I mean, unless you're literally at war, like with Russia, but even Russians have an embassy, you know?
Indeed. And Alex, you mentioned 2018 versus now, what has really changed? And so, Cindy, to what extent is the embarrassment of MPs that were embroiled in the so-called Chinese spying case a factor? We had Tom Tugendhat, we had Alicia Cairns. You know, is it a coincidence that opposition to the plan is led by some of those MPs?
Oh, that's an interesting suggestion. I don't know, because I think that's a little bit speculative, but certainly in their strength of talking about the spying case itself last autumn, I felt like some people did feel like they needed to draw a clear dividing line between themselves and Christopher Cash, who they did work with and know.
208 secret rooms and a hidden chamber just 1 metre from cables serving the City of London and the British people. That is what the unredacted plans tell us that the Chinese Communist Party has planned for its new embassy if the government gives them the go-ahead. If the government is as shocked as we are today on this, have the ministers already called in the Chinese ambassador to explain these secret rooms? And if not, why not? The Prime Minister, we understand, is planning to visit Beijing this month. Is it true the embassy will be approved this week? That the Prime Minister plans to reward the Communist Party, holding a British national hostage, torturing him in confinement, who put spies at the heart of our democracy, is bad enough. To turn up with a gift in hand begging for handouts is beggar's belief. Protect our economy, protect the British people, deny the Chinese Communist Party their embassy.
I think some of it is unhelpful in the sense of the media reporting around it. You know, for example, the idea that there might be secret torture chambers in the basement of the embassy, it is just fantastical. And the idea that that has had so much purchase on the public imagination just is a symptom of how emotional our feelings about China are at the moment, that they're not super rational. The idea that the Chinese...
There is an underlying xenophobia to it.
Well, maybe, yeah. The idea that the Chinese would use their own embassy, which will be MI5 surveilled and policed by the Metropolitan Police to take in Hong Kongers and torture them underground rather than, like, you know, a safe house outside Hull, right? It's just unbelievable.
I think they've been watching too much Netflix, because I've definitely seen a few embassies in London where people have been tortured in a super basement.
Like, come on.
24 has a lot to answer for.
Quiet, Riot. Quiet, Riot.
I am always fascinated by the language that's used by media when we see these sort of stories coming out, though, because my initial reaction was like yours, Cindy. Come on, if China's going to do this, it's going to do it properly, isn't it? Of course it is. But the language around the rooms and the plans was kind of bizarre. China doesn't have to build secret rooms. It could build 27 basement storage cupboards for secretarial stuff and then quietly transform them into either torture rooms or listening rooms.
If they labelled it as gym or canteen, would you really believe them anyway?
Exactly.
That's not the problem here.
Which is why I was wondering to myself, why are all the media, why is the source of this information making such a big deal about the fact that these are secret rooms? Doesn't make any difference if they're secret rooms or not. Once it's an embassy, we're not going in there to root around anyway. It's a red herring.
And look, let's not be too dismissive of the security concerns. Like, if those cables do exist, then what they would be transmitting would be things, as I understand it, would be things like frequency of transactions, frequency of emails. I don't think they can literally see email addresses, which is what I've heard somewhere. You know, cables don't carry that kind of information if you're just tapping it from the outside, as far as I understand. But the idea is that if you gather that kind of information in the future with the help of AI or quantum computing, you can analyse, you know, details about, let's say, leading city firms and that kind of stuff. So, you know, let's not dismiss those concerns. But I think that if the security services have said they can mitigate it, a few things will be in their mind. You know, can they do something before the Chinese move in there? Because bear in mind, they don't have the site yet. Can they do something to counter-surveil? There's the idea of, you know, China currently has 7 different sites for its diplomatic mission in London at the moment, spread all over the place. One in I think Hampstead, one in Old Jewry, and one in Portland Place, amongst others. What China wants to do is put all of its diplomats together so that they can spy on their own people and their own people are not fraternising with Brits too much. And actually that's quite good for MI5 as well. That's quite good for MI5
also,
just to have hold them behind one compound.
But if they wanted to tap those cables, why not buy a private office building in the city?
Well, look,
who would prevent...
I worked for a company years and years ago. We moved offices. within the city of London. And the building that we moved into was being sold by a tech company who had bought it from a Chinese company a decade before. And when they gave the keys to our building manager, said, just so you know, it took us 18 months to debug.
Wow, yeah.
So it does happen.
Of course.
But that's very much corporate espionage to try and figure out what this tech company were doing. Alex, I want to talk to you about trade implications. We often talk about the diplomacy of keeping Trump sweet because we don't want to be slapped with tariffs. China is, of course, an incredibly important trading partner to every country in the world now, pretty much. What do you think the trade implications could be from a kind of poorly handled decision over the Chinese embassy?
It seems to me from what I've seen that the Chinese are taking this quite personally, and rightly so, to be honest. Because like I said, first of all, government approved this in 2018. And it's meant to be a tit for tat as well. So it's meant to go hand in hand with them approving a complete rebuild of a crumbling British embassy in the middle of Beijing. We're seeing no commensurate caution with anyone else. So China is right to feel singled out. I saw one quote from a Chinese official that said, this issue will come up as the first item of business at every meeting about trade until it is resolved. You can take it as a given that a massive superpower in your capital is going to be trying to spy on you, whoever that is. And so what you need to do is improve your countermeasures and your security so that you are difficult to spy on, not try to control the physical site from which people might do that. I mean, they own that building anyway. They could not build an embassy there at all. Just build a secret basement. It's private property right now. Who's going to stop them?
So when I was talking to a Chinese diplomat in London recently about this, he was kind of, I don't know if he was trolling me or not, but he was basically saying, well, you know, this thing about the cables, we didn't even know they were there. So thanks so much for telling us. I was like, I can't really know you're trolling me right now.
Let's get on to global issues then. There seems to be a pretty fundamental disagreement as to whether US action in Venezuela was at least in part motivated by Trump wanting to send a stay out of our neighborhood message to China. What's your view on that, Cindy?
I think there's probably different motivations for people in the administration. So I think for Marco Rubio, who is slightly more maybe kind of strategic about foreign policy, and obviously with his Cuban background, he is probably thinking this is the way to get China and Russia out of Latin America. Is Trump thinking that? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think he was just annoyed about Maduro. And I think he, you know, and the reason I say that is because since then, Trump has flirted with the idea of keeping selling China oil from Venezuela. You know, when someone asked him about that at the press conference after the strike, he said, well, we're open for business. I was like, okay, is that what Marco Rubio thinks? You know, so I think that's different motivations that have led to the same action there. Now, whether or not Marco Rubio's kind of campaign succeeds or Trump actually is just saying, like, we've got to do business with the Chinese, we don't know yet, I don't think. Until they start pumping that Venezuelan oil out under American control, I don't think we'll know what really happens to your Chinese influence there.
The other leg of that equation, which I saw replicated quite a lot, but also disagreed with quite a lot, is that this kind of action by the US will signal to China that you can do likewise with Taiwan.
Yeah.
The more foreign policy wonk people are saying that this doesn't make a difference to what China does in Taiwan, because effectively their policy of economic coercion is working well, and it's a long-term plan. And
So I tend to err on that second side. I think China has always seen the world as quite realpolitik anyway. You know, it's no surprise to China that America will be, you know, swinging its hard power around like this, because that's what China has always perceived America as doing anyway. You know, you look at Iraq, for example, or you look at the American bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade back in 1999, which had no repercussions for America. And they said it was an accident, but the Chinese always thought that was, you know, not an accident. So I think China is not naive in that sense. So there's no kind of, oh my God, America don't play ball. We don't play ball either now then. There's no that kind of feeling at all. The reason they don't take Taiwan, they haven't taken Taiwan yet, is that the hard power is just not there. You know, is the PLA can't do it quickly enough without serious repercussions from the American military. It's that the Chinese economy is not strong enough to basically endure economic hit from the disruption of the trade, or maybe global sanctions. And maybe the CCP itself would be under existential threat if Chinese people saw, Chinese people in Taiwan being killed and massacred, So I think all of that plays into Beijing's mind about Taiwan. If one day it can do these things without serious repercussions, then they will take Taiwan, no matter what happens to Venezuela.
Of course, China, if you look at their foreign policy for the last 20 or 30 years, it seems to me to be a relentless, slow, steady advancement of their various goals rather than a smash and grab opportunistic attitude. It's not their style to suddenly go.
Consensualism and gradualism are kind of fundamental values, certainly from my experience of being there. It definitely seemed to me that nothing was ever wanted to be perceived as having been done as a knee-jerk reaction. Whether there was genuine consensus there or not is my point. But certainly in terms of the outward, how it would be presented to the world, that something would be done.
China, we shouldn't think that it's not capable of making changes in the relatively short term. The trade figures that came out of China today were quite eye-popping, and if you saw them, it ran a $1.2 trillion trade surplus last year. So if you don't understand your economics, that means it imported $1.2 trillion less than it exported. Just to put that figure in context, $1.2 trillion is pretty much exactly the same as the GDP of Saudi Arabia, the biggest economy in the Middle East, in a year when Trump was turning the world upside down with tariffs. So keeping relatively quiet and allowing Trump to continue breaking things and then quietly taking advantage of it is a fabulous way for China
or beginning to sell US Treasury bonds.
Do we have any idea or clarity on China's influence on the Russia-Ukraine situation at the moment?
I wanted to know about that.
Pressing for a negotiated ceasefire? Are they agnostic or are they pressing against it?
I think they don't care. As in, I think they'll be trying to maximize their advantage regardless of what happens. And they don't want to expend too much resources on making it come to an end or influencing it one way or the other. Exactly. Because benefits of the war, Russia gets closer to China. China gets a more stable, discounted source of oil. So again, Venezuela doesn't matter. There's this kind of rhetorically this anti-West alliance, Putin standing with Xi on Tiananmen Square and that kind of stuff. At the same time, obviously, if the war ended, China's relationship with Europe would be better. There would be a rebuilding project in Ukraine, which undoubtedly would take Chinese companies in there. So basically there's ups and downs for China on both sides of the equation. What's the definite down is for China to be some kind of global policeman and actually expend that moral and resource capital to try to bring this conflict in. It's just not the way they do things.
Middle East, ditto?
Yeah, Middle East, ditto. Exactly. So rhetorically, they were very anti-Israel because of the kind of anti-American imperialism thing during the Gaza conflict, but didn't really do anything at all. Now, I guess the only difference in the Middle East...
Now that it's spreading eastwards, though, and we're talking about Iran. And...
I was going to say.
Yeah, so Iran, they are not going to come to Iran's help. They didn't in the 12-day war last year. When Iran's nuclear facilities were being bombed, they did basically nothing. And actually in Venezuela as well, just on the Friday that Maduro, Friday night, Maduro got whisked away. Earlier that day, he was meeting with the Chinese delegation. And I'm sure the Chinese delegation was saying something to him like, yes, of course, we'll try to support you, but not really doing anything. It's just not their style to really expend capital doing that kind of stuff. And so they'll be watching to see how Iran turns out, I think. But it's not a core interest for them by any means.
Completing our whistle-stop tour of the globe. Has the Chinese leadership said anything about Greenland?
So the foreign ministry did comment on this and said, if America wants to take advantage of other countries, don't use other countries as an excuse for that. Referring to
That's quite funny.
The excuse that is because of Chinese warships around Greenland and Russian warships and all that sort of stuff, saying nothing to do with us. And the Chinese element of that is not true. The Russian element is much more true than the Chinese element of having kind of military presence there, at least.
Which I do think leads us neatly into the final question, and that is this Trump push for a return to sort of might is right, spheres of influence world. Does it suit China quite well, since it's the undisputed heavyweight of its own neighborhood? Or is it actually quite undermining of the globalization that it needs for its trade and economic model?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think China definitely has already been living in this world. That's how it was seeing this world already, that America is always going to take what it wants anyway. And then law is just like kind of like, I guess Marx would say, the superstructure on top of the kind of the real structure underneath. So in that way, China is in a better position after Venezuela than, let's say, the EU, where politicians have been pro-international law and pro-nicer way of doing things. And now suddenly the rug's been pulled under them. Beijing doesn't have that.
And they have to defend an ally who's now doing the opposite.
Very, very tricky position to be in. Yeah. China has played the game of international law on the surface, though, engaging in the UN, for example, all this different stuff in Davos, because it knows that that's the rules that it's playing. And so it's kind of almost cosplaying. Like, if those are the terms on which the game is being played, then I want to stake in that too. But always thinking underneath there's a real power struggle there going on. So if one day the world totally just got rid of the pretense of international law, I think China would be very happy to do that. But your point about trade is really interesting. And I think that's a really deeper question here about whether or not trade is dependent on international law.
And maritime law,
yeah,
very specifically, like if America can grab whatever tanker, is that a world in which international trade is something that doesn't suddenly have shooting security and insurance costs?
Yeah, and let's be clear, like China doesn't follow international law when it doesn't suit it, right? In 2016, the UN tribunal said that its claims on the South China Sea were not legitimate. Totally ignored it.
Yeah.
Like continues to build artificial islands. And it doesn't care. It's like America in that sense. Yeah, so it also isn't playing by the rules. And so that doesn't seem to impact the way it trades, because the comparative advantage there is kind of more central, more of a crux of things than whatever law might have made trade more fair.
We usually give the call to action to the guest in the second item. I mean, my call to action would be to follow Cindy's writing, and we will put a link in the show notes. But can I hand over to you to recommend maybe a blog, a Substack, a pod that you trust, that you think has a measured, balanced, non-crazy view on...
Oh, God, I've got so many. Which one to choose? I think the FT, the Financial Times, does a really, really good job on the international reporting. So that's my top recommendation, I think it would be. But I think with China, it's really, really important to get a broad spectrum of opinions. So the balanced diet I would recommend, as well as the FT, is Bill Bishop in America has a Substack called Cynicism, SINO-ism, which is paid for, but I think it's really worth it, which is always like a good comprehensive roundup of latest economic and political news from China. Tends on a hawkish end. So the balanced diet is then on the other end for the more cultural stories and the stuff that maybe will normalize China a bit more. It's actually a very underrated outlet called Sixth Tone, which is based in Shanghai, and they do really interesting kind of cultural and youth-based stories. Things like, I don't know, like the latest micro series, that kind of stuff. I just think it's important to have that balanced diet because it's such a big topic. That I wouldn't.
And also, it's such a big country.
It's such a big country. And
how many time zones? One, but it's a massive country.
But what I mean is, I was listening to Behind the Lines episode on Iran.
17th largest country in the world.
And they were saying that so often when we talk from a foreign policy perspective, we tend to see countries as monolithic things that just have one view. But actually, even within the Communist Party, there will be currents that are pushing in different directions, and people that think spheres of influence is better than globalized trade, and so it's important to see the people, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Of course. And I think it's important to keep an open mind that actually what you're hearing about China might not be what you expect. And that is good to challenge yourself.
Quiet.
And now it's time to turn that frown upside down because Kenny is coming along to cheer us all up with a grin and share it.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. I want good news.
Your gumbo story last week, it really captured listeners.
And gumbo was the answer on Wordle yesterday.
Oh my
God. Done yesterday's one.
Spoiler. Anyway, Kenny, come on. What do you got for us?
This is about something that's been happening in the Yorkshire town of Thirsk. for some time. But
I know it well. Did my driving test there.
You did your driving test there? Oh, I hope you didn't run over any ducks. More of which in a second. We've only just heard about it and we thought it was lovely. So I've called this one, Why Thirsk is Ducking Great. So in Thirsk, a flock of about 30 ducks has been waddling out of the river every night for years to sleep in the town centre car park. Mummy duck, daddy duck, whole bunch of ducklings of various sizes.
And it is an old Georgian Market Square or Victorian Market Square.
Yes,
Or something.
it's cobbles and all sorts. So it's a proper chocolate box location. So the ducks have chosen a lovely, lovely place to waddle around, but it ain't necessarily safe for a whole bunch of ducks to waddle around. So instead of tutting or just filming, the locals have organised themselves into volunteer duck wardens.
Duck lollipop lady.
Duck lollipop people, exactly, in high-vis duck vests. And they guide the birds across the roads. They go so far as to set out traffic cones for
Oh my
them.
God, I love this so
It's
much.
better than my local council. And they even stay late to keep them safe. So this story went viral before Christmas, but it's been a quiet tradition in Thirsk, turns out, for a couple of years now, which feels fitting, really, because Thirsk is the home of All Creatures Great and Small, James Herriot, the vet series.
Of course.
It's almost like it was meant to be. So I think, well done, Thirsk Duck Patrol. Oh, and also, why do all ducks sing the blues?
God.
Because they're Bill Withers.
I didn't know it was Christmas.
I'm
It's
going,
a Christmas cracker joke.
It is a Christmas cracker joke.
I'm going to
Christmas
edit
cracker
this out,
joke.
I'm telling you now.
If this comes out,
This is
I'm going to
coming
set the
out.
Duck Patrol on you. You don't want to
coming
mess
out.
with the Thirsk Duck Patrollers.
Duck off, mate.
I can see this becoming the new Bat Tunnel. Like, the housing demand in North Yorkshire. I mean, I don't think it is Rishi Sunak's constituency. I think he might be a bit further north in Northallerton and Richmond.
Yep.
So it's probably, Eastern World and Thirsk.
I have to say the Bat Tunnel always sounds so romantic to me. It sounds like something that leads Batman to the Bat lair.
Yeah, to the Bat Cave. But I can just see this being a reason to not build new homes in
Another
Thirsk.
planning
the ducks.
row.
We've got it.
Chinese embassy was stopped yesterday because of concerns over
I
ducklings.
know what they need to do. These campaigners need to put some newts on the Royal Mint.
And many, many thanks to Salford City Guy for suggesting that story.
Hey.
Yeah, thank you, Kenny. And listeners, as ever, we'll drop a link in the show notes so you can not just grin, but also share it.
Quiet Riot.
And that's all we've got time for today. First up, a huge thank you to Cindy for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun.
You will have to come back. A huge thanks to everybody at home for tuning in.
And don't forget, we have pledged to keep Quiet Riot free for everyone, available at the same time. But should you want to support us, head over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. Every little helps, as they say.
And if you fancy another fix of quiet rioting, we'll be back at the weekend with our regular Sunday school smorgasbord.
And we'll try to cover, things like the ID U-turn, if that's still policy.
I'm so
by
sorry,
then.
Alex.
If that is still policy by
I
then.
think Alex might be hurt here. This is a scripting bitch session coming in.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So we send you loads of hugs, loads of happiness, and we love you all very, very much.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangita. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
What?
We're already recording, so you know this is all going in.
It's the bloopers for the next 6
We
months.
have a
Thanks
little
very much.
blooper thing at the end.
Oh, that's so
where
good.
The sound engineer, Alex, picks like the most embarrassing
That's
bit
very
of
good.
the chat.
It's compromat.
Yes.